And good morning, Hillspring Church. So glad to be with you guys this morning. Glad that you could join us online for church, the way church is being done these days. My name is Dan. I'm pastor of Hillspring Church, and this is my beautiful wife, Raelle.
Hi, everyone.
We're really glad that you guys are with us this morning. And so as you're logging in, if you're just joining us, please say hello in the comments. We love to hear from you. It means a lot to us just to know that you're out there. Because you know what? Otherwise, it just kind of feels like we're sitting in my kitchen talking to a camera. So it's nice to know that you're there. So leave some comments below. Say hi to us. Say hi to one another. And we're glad that you're there. We're hoping that you guys are all hanging in there. You know, being at home. It's been a while now. You know, we're going on 5 weeks or so. But we're just praying for you every week. Still love to hear from you throughout the week. Shoot us an email. Let us know how you're doing. I've been checking in with you guys as well. And just know that we're continuing to pray for you guys. The good thing about church online, though, is that, you know, maybe you've been doing some Hangout calls or lots of Zoom calls with work, too. Is the great thing about this is you only have to get dressed from the waist up, right? Yeah. But glad that you're with us. And again, if you're joining us, say hello in the comments. But Ryan and Colleen, they have some announcements for us this morning. So we're going to head over to those guys at this time. Let's take a look.
Good morning, Hillspring Church, and welcome to Hillspring Church Online. My name is Ryan.
Colleen.
And we have a couple of announcements for you.
All right, so for all of you couples out there, this Friday at 8 p.m., we're going to have a marriage enrichment and date night with Dan and Raelle on Facebook Live.
Yeah. So April 24th, that's this Friday. We're really encouraging you to grab your favorite snack. So for Colleen, that's chips and dip. For me, that's any kind of chocolate, or maybe you want to actually like sit down and have a nice like candlelight dinner. So grab your laptop, your tablet, something, your phone, and just tune in to Facebook Live for this kind of marriage enrichment, this thing,
Yeah, also, if you have any questions about marriage or anything you want to make sure that Dan and Raelle discuss, please email connect@hillspringchurch.org. They really want to know what you want addressed.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to talk about? And actually, that email is really great because it's actually the connection point for any of your questions in general. If you're looking for a way to like connect in, that's where you do it. So connect@hillspringchurch.org. Have an amazing week, Hillspring.
Thank you, Ryan and Colleen. And so if you're just joining us online, we're so glad that you could be with us this morning for church, to gather together as a community, to learn, to hear from God, and to grow in our faith together. Please say hello in the comments. As I said before, it's always great to hear from you guys so that we know that you're out there. This is also the time that we remind you of a couple things. First of all, while we're not meeting in person anymore, you can continue to give securely online at hillspringchurch.org/donate. And also, kids' videos and activity sheets are available every Sunday morning at hillspringkids.org. And so if you haven't already done that, please head there right now, and you can get a tablet loaded up for your kids. They can watch a video for their age group, as well as take a look at an activity sheet. But every Sunday morning, those guys will be available there. Those videos will be available there. Also, my two sons, Owen, Ashton, and I have really enjoyed connecting with Hillspring Kids during our midweek Wednesday afternoons at 2 o'clock to do a craft and to do a little Bible lesson together. We've had a really good time. And this past Wednesday, we built some paper boats and we floated those, we decorated them, and we learned about the fact that Jesus is with us, Jesus is God with us. And because of that, we don't need to be afraid. And so actually I have some pictures of some of the artwork that our kids have sent in. And I just want to show you that. Thank you guys for sending these in. And we're going to try and keep you in the loop with what our kids have been up to. And so awesome job with the kids here. They all did an amazing job building these paper boats, decorating them. And I see that some of you had a chance to float them after as well. So thank you, kids, for sending those in. Want to encourage you guys to continue when we do the midweeks to send in your pictures to connect@hillspringchurch.org, and we'll try to include those in a weekly update during this point. And if your kids haven't been able to join us yet, please, try to get them connected 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoons. We'd love for them to join us. Again, it's just really important, not only that we gather together as adults, but that the kids have an opportunity to connect as well. And I'm really enjoying the fact that as their pastor, I get this opportunity to connect with them in a special way. So it's meaningful for me, and I hope it's meaningful for them. So try to get them set up. We'll try to send out a reminder just before, letting you know that it's happening. But take a look at that with your kids,
You
okay?
can go back and look at it as well, right? You've posted it.
Yeah,
So if they missed it and they want to do it back.
Exactly. If you missed it and you're looking for something, at another point in the week for your kids to do, good point. You can log into Facebook or our YouTube channel as well, and those are all there available so they can do the craft at another point. Okay. Well, it's time for our encouraging verse of the week, something that we've been doing since we've gone online, because again, it's really nice to see people's faces in the church and just hear from different people that we know are part of our church community. And so this week's verse comes to us from the Robillard family. So let's take a look.
Hi, Hill Spring Church. We are the Robillard family. This week's verse of encouragement comes to you from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16 to 18.
Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Have a great week, Hill Spring. Bye.
Good morning, Hill Spring Church. I'm so glad that you can join us. Why don't you sing with me this morning? Today is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. So let's sing this out together. Casting my cares aside. I'm casting my cares aside. I'm leaving my past behind. I'm setting my heart in
glorify you, God. God, and magnify you. God, we thank you that you are here with us in the darkest times, Lord. That you are with us in the times of goodness, Lord. God, we thank you that nothing surprises you. We thank you that you are faithful even when we're not, God. We thank you so much that we can meet together, Lord. We thank you for the body of Christ. You are so good, God, and your love endures forever, and you are worthy to be praised in all times, in all circumstances, Lord. Help us to do this, we pray. We love you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate your leadership this morning. And if you're just joining us, we want to welcome you this morning. We're so glad that you guys could find us online and join with us this morning for church. I mean, the church is more than just Sunday morning, but for our service this morning online. We're glad that you're here. And again, please leave a comment, say hello to us, but we're going to move into some teaching here in just a second. But you know me, I don't watch a lot of news. I don't watch a lot of news. I know some people place a lot of value on news. I know some people are checking and watching the news all throughout the day. But to be honest, I feel that most of the news today consists of a few things. First of all, I think it consists of really just stories that are meant for shock value, in order to earn advertising revenue, which is unfortunate because it changes the way that people do news these days. And so they do things for shock value to drive people to websites and earn advertising revenue. A lot of what I see in the news today is really rooted in judgment and arrogance as well. So if you listen to a lot of stories or things that are posted, a lot of it is just slamming other people, slamming people, putting people down for, what they consider just dumb decisions that they've made, whether those are politicians or people in the world. And much of the news is that, just people judging people, tearing people down for the decisions that have been made. And really, the other thing is that news becomes this way to promote various political agendas. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not making a claim this morning about fake news or anything like that, not in any way. It's just that there's a lot of bad news, There's not a lot of life-giving value in the news these days. There's really not a lot of life-giving value. Not only that, news, you can spend a lot of time watching it, but it becomes outdated so fast. And so, you spend time watching news and finding out what the latest things are. This happens a lot in the area of health, right, and nutrition. And one day people are saying this, and then not long after, all of those things are old, and there's new news and there's new things being communicated. So apart from knowing what I'm supposed to be doing as a Canadian citizen, and so I do stay in touch with the news for that, to make sure that I'm a responsible citizen, especially in times like these, to know where I'm supposed to be going, what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't devote a lot of time to the news, because if you're not careful, the news will drag you down. It really does. And not just emotionally. I mean, news can drag you down emotionally. You watch a lot of news, and if it's bad news, then you can kind of go away feeling heavy the more time you spend in it. But I actually think that the news can drag us down relationally, morally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it as well, because if we consume too much of those things that I was talking about before, a lot of that judgment and arrogance that we see in the news, we can take on that same attitude. And we can start to be people who, you see it, people are commenting and slamming people all the time. I mean, the feeds, the comment sections are terrible, with online news. People just ranting back and forth and tearing people down. And that really brings us down when our spirit is shaped by those types of things. And so it's also quite possible that many of you this morning feel really overwhelmed. If you spent time in the news with what's going on, you might feel really overwhelmed by bad news these days. And so with all that's been going on in the world, I really felt that it's time for us to focus on some good news. And not just stories about puppies cuddling with horses, that type of stuff that I'm talking about. I mean, yes, it's cute. And yes, you've probably shared it with me and with the entire world. But news that is bigger than all of those things, more encouraging and of more value than anything that you could read online. And I'm serious. I'm not just over exaggerating this to drive up, web traffic. This is news that is bigger than anything you could ever read online, has more value. And what is some of the greatest news that you've had in your life?
Greatest.
Apart from the obvious spiritual answer, which we're going to save for later. Yeah.
Well, Owen's pointing at himself here. So yes, definitely finding out we were expecting our 2 sons.
Yeah. You're not making another announcement or anything like that today. Okay.
Absolutely not.
Good.
No. I get excited when you tell me we're going to go on vacation.
Oh, do I have that power to tell you when we're going on vacation?
Well,
yeah. When we decide, we come to a final decision. Yeah.
Well, I'm always up for it. So.
Right, that's true. Yes, that's good news. When something good happens to you, right, like that, like a blessing, like kids come into your life. Yeah, exactly.
But I guess on a more serious note, I remember my mom was in surgery. She's been on a couple of surgeries, I guess, over the past few years, and just praying through that, and then having the doctor say that it went well, and that she, I remember just the anxious feeling of waiting and then hearing that good news,
for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And maybe you've had one of those experiences yourself. And let's try. I know that a lot of people have had bad news, bad experiences. But just think about that. Some of those experiences that you've had where, you've received a good report from the doctor, or maybe you had some loan forgiveness as a student, or something like that. Those are really great moments in life that bring us a lot of joy. There are actually, if you didn't know this, there's actually books in the Bible or sections of the Bible devoted specifically to good news, okay? And these are what you may have heard referred to as the Gospels. The Gospels. And the word gospel literally means good news. And so these are collections of good news that have been included in the Bible, written by 4 guys named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And not only are these Gospels full of good news, they contain the news that they contain has more value than any other news you could read. It really does. And while this news has been around for 2,000 years or so, right, it never becomes outdated. And that's the crazy thing about this news. The news in the Gospels, in the good news, written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it never grows outdated. And in fact, the news today has as much value as it did the day it was written. Especially if you're hearing this news for the first time, it has more value today, or as much value today as the day that it was written. And so we're going to spend a number of weeks as a church family, or if you're joining us, we're glad that you've joined in with us, looking at the major headline stories from the good news of John. So we're not going to look at every single one, although really what John is a collection of the headline stories that he personally experienced in his own life. But if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you to grab that, because again, we're going to be walking through a part of John this morning. If you have YouVersion, you can look it up on your phone. If not, we will put it up on the screen, and so you can follow along that way as well. But if you have a Bible, it's a really good habit to get into, just learning where it is in the Bible and tracking along with us that way. And what we're going to begin with this morning is the front page story, okay? And if you're younger, maybe you still get a newspaper on your porch. We still get a paper on our porch, not like, it's the local one. And so maybe you're familiar with the front page story. That's the spot where usually the newspaper will publish the most exciting story of all, right? And it's the one that really grabs the attention. So we're going to look this morning at the front page story of the Gospel of John. And I'm serious about this. So as much as it's fun to think about, the news and newspapers, I'm dead serious that this news is huge. This front page story that John begins his gospel with, begins his good news record with, is absolutely enormous. And I love this part of the Bible. I love it. I'm not sure there's another place in the Bible that has the ability to shape our understanding of the universe, of life and faith as this section of John. I love it. It has deeply impacted me as a person and the way that I understand my faith. And up front, it can be a bit confusing, these first, few verses of John. But I want to encourage you to stick with me as we walk through it, and you'll see how big of a deal this really is. And as Rael reads this, I want you to try and think about what we're reading as if you know nothing about Jesus and Christianity. And you might be like, why would I do that? Well, I think that that's really important sometimes because so many of us are raised and we're influenced by different people, different interpretations of the Bible, different expressions of the Christian religion in our lives, that there are times where I think we need to try to push some of that aside and read the Bible for what it is and say, God, help renew my mind, help me understand clearly what it is that you wanted to show me through the Bible. And that's not to say that the things that you have learned aren't true, but sometimes we need to look at the Bible this way and then look back at the things that we've been taught and say, okay, are those things supported by what we're learning today, right? So that's important. So I want to encourage you, as we read through this, try to read it as though this is the first time that you've ever read it. You're picking up this newspaper that John has written, and you're going to read this headline story for the first time, all right? On the other hand, maybe you don't know anything about Jesus. Maybe you're tuning in for the first time because you're just curious because of this whole thing that's happening. There's lots of church online these days, and this is giving you an opportunity to explore faith. And so you've tuned in this morning, you've logged in this morning to take a peek and just to see, if there's anything there that maybe you want to start to investigate further. And this is the absolute perfect morning for you to be with us this morning because this news that you're going to hear is life-changing, I believe. And this is a great morning for you as well, like all of us, to try to read this as though it's us reading it for the first time together. And so John begins his front page story like this.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning.
So we're reading this as if we know nothing of Jesus, okay? So John begins by talking about something translated as the Word. That's all we know, right? In the beginning was the Word. We don't even know anything about it yet other than it's just described as the Word, which is kind of a peculiar way of describing something. That's not something that's really familiar with most people. And he says that the Word was something that was in the beginning. And we've heard this phrase before in the beginning, at the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis. But if you think of anything like in the beginning, like not just the beginning of your day, if you were saying in the beginning, the original beginning, right? Our minds go back to the beginning of all things before anything that we know to be true or anything that we know exists, before any of that took place. The beginning is a place and time before everything that we know existed. Before the universe existed, the Word existed. Whatever the Word is, it existed. And the Word was both with God, John says, and was God. So now he describes the Word as a he. So the Word was a person, not a human being, but a unique being that was with God in the beginning. And this is a big mystery here because the Word was with God and was God. Right? How is that possible? And this is a mystery, but I think God gives us a bit of a hint. I think marriage gives us an idea about how God says that when we are united as husband and wife, we are one. So even though we are one, we're also two persons. And I'm not saying that it's a direct thing, but I think there's hints there about that. But somehow the Word and God exist together and are one in the beginning. Either way, all we know so far is that God and the Word existed in some type of relationship, and yet we're also one God. And then John goes on to say this.
Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made.
All right, so through him, all things were made. Anything that exists didn't exist except for the fact that he made it exist. I mean, have you ever made something out of nothing? No? No. I haven't either. I mean, the other day we made a pizza out of almost nothing, right? So we went into the fridge, we had like nothing around here, and we literally took little pieces of whatever we could find, and we made a pizza that I think turned out pretty good. You know, the kids may debate us on that one, but we made something out of not a lot, but it wasn't something out of nothing. I've never made something out of nothing. But here John says that everything that was made out of nothing through the word. And then to reiterate, John says there's nothing that has been brought into existence without him. And so whatever your perception of the beginning is, the word that we're reading about here is the source of that beginning. Okay, so stick with me here again. So it's a little confusing, but the word existed in the beginning, and then anything that existed after the beginning exists because the word brought it into being. Okay, and then next John writes this. Next John says,
"In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind."
All right, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And so to say that in the word was life here means that life belongs to the word. Okay, that the word, whatever the word is, right, possesses life. The word is the source of life. Life comes from the word and from the word alone. And life refers not just to physical, but spiritual, right? I mean, I think we all know that there's more to life than just the physical, that you can have nothing but still be alive, or you can have everything but still feel dead, right? So we know that life here is not just talking about physical, but also spiritual. And so we can have nothing but still be alive. And then, as John says, the life that he gives was the light of all humanity. The life that comes from the word is the source of wisdom, understanding for all of humanity. And so the word is where truth, wisdom, all of these things originate. Everything that exists has come from the word, all right? And so if we just pause here, at this point, apart from atheists who deny the existence of God, and even then there has to be some cause to the universe. So even atheists would say that there's some type of beginning of the universe. What John has communicated is something that all of humanity and all religions do agree on, that there was a starting point to life, right? And that's all that John has talked about at this point, is that there was a starting point to life, and he is giving credit to that starting point to something called the Word, right? The Word was in the beginning, and everything that exists has flowed out from the Word. He has made it come into existence, and the Word is it, all right? And so the Word is the source of life, is what John is saying. The Word is the source of life. The Word is the power that's responsible for life, the creative force behind all that exists, the template of creation. You could say that the Word is that which created and holds all things together. The Word is the truth. The Word is the divine will for all that exists. But the Word is the source of all life, okay? Now again, don't jump ahead here. Remember, this is the first time you're reading it, all right? But John goes on to say this.
"The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it."
All right, so now John uses the term light to describe the word, because now the light is actually providing a visual example of what the word is up to. He says the light shines in the darkness, and there's two things. So first of all, the light shines in the darkness, assuming that the world is the darkness that John is talking about. And I think it's safe to say that darkness typically represents a lack of understanding, right? If you're in the dark, you can't see, and so you bang into things and you hurt yourself. So the light shines in the darkness. The world is darkness, and the world is a place where there's a lack of understanding and wisdom. And then, especially in contrast to what is truth, which is the light. But John says that light shines. He says it shines in the darkness, meaning it's visible or attainable to the darkness. That if it's shining in the darkness, that anyone who's in the darkness can see that light shining. It's now attainable. And the second thing he says is that darkness has not overcome it. Darkness has not overcome it. Now, I don't do this very often because I think that Most translations do a good job in translating the words that they're talking about. But this is one spot where I think that it's possible there might have been a better word than even using this idea of overcoming or not, because the Greek word here often means more often to obtain, to grasp, to understand, or to take hold of. And so if you use that interpretation, you would say, the light shines in the darkness. So wisdom, truth, life has been made known or has been made visible in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it or took hold of it or obtained it or grasped it, right? That kind of makes sense, right? And I think the next few verses, they confirm this. And so let's speed things up a little bit. We have a lot of text to work through, but we're going to read that. And I think the next verses clarify that, okay?
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light.
Okay, so again, stick with me as we go through these verses, but to make things even more confusing, now John, the writer of this good news, is saying that there was another John. He's not referring to himself. He's referring to another human being that was not the writer of this good news, was sent by God to tell people about the light. So to point to the light and say, all of this truth is made visible, but he was not the light himself. And the reason why he told people about the light, John, the good news writer, is explaining, was so that all people might believe in the light, which means to trust in the light, to put faith in the light that was shining or available to those in the darkness. And here's the reason why I think obtained, grasped, or understood would be a better translation of what the darkness didn't do with the light. Listen to what John says next.
The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him.
All right, so John is saying that the word, or this source of light, right, the template for humanity, truth, wisdom, he's saying that this light that gives understanding to all people came into the world, but the world did not grasp or take hold of it, right? And so even though the word or light was responsible for bringing everything that we know, everything that we see into existence or being, that which was created by him, so us, people, didn't take hold of the light, didn't embrace the truth, but rather continued to live in darkness. And so, okay, you're like, well, this isn't the greatest news so far. You're like, this headline story that we're talking about here, it's not the greatest news, right? But wait for it. Listen to what John says next.
Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God.
Okay. And there's so much in every one of these verses, but we want to get this general idea of this front page story that John is saying here. And here is some good news. Here's the good news that John is establishing at the very beginning of his collection of good news, the front page story. While many did not grasp or take hold of the light, so the power that created the universe that shone into the darkness, all who did, okay, so he's not saying that no one grasped it or took advantage of it. All who did, so all who saw it and recognized that light as the source of life, as the source of truth, as the source of wisdom, and trusted it and embraced it, all of them were given a gift, the right to become a child of God. It's amazing, right? And so to summarize all of what John has said, right? To summarize all of what John has said, John writes this, okay?
The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
And I'm going to read it one more time because this summarizes everything that John has been talking about so far, right? We began with the Word, and he's saying the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and we have seen it, okay? The light that shines in the darkness, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John says the Word became flesh. Now, have you ever heard of the term to flesh something out, right? And so the point with that whole phrase, if you're going to flesh something out, is to take something that is invisible, whether that's an idea, a thought, right? And make it visible or understandable. You flesh it out. You make it concrete is another thing that people say, to take something that is abstract or invisible and make it solid and tangible, right? And listen to this, the source of life, the creative force behind everything that exists, fleshed himself out, right? Literally became human. That's about as fleshed out as you can be. You know, the source of life, the creator of the universe, fleshed himself out, became human, and made his dwelling in the world. That is the process by which the light shone in the darkness. And he says, we have seen his glory. Glory here refers to the full majesty of the Word, right? The full revelation. You think about how powerful the Word is. That everything that has been created, the universe, humanity, all of creation, truth, the design, the intent of creation, even the way that creation should exist and be kept in order, all of that glory of the Word was made tangible and made visible, right, as it became flesh in human form. It was revealed or made visible in the darkness of the world. And this is the amazing front page story to the good news of John. The good news is that God gives life freely through Jesus to all who take hold of him. God gives life freely through Jesus to all who will take hold of him. The creative power behind the universe, the source of life, has fleshed himself out in Jesus. And there's two critical points that John makes that I think he writes this so well because he doesn't leave anything out. He captures every important nuance of what happened. He says that the Word became fleshed himself among us. And he said, though, that he came from the Father full of grace and truth. So he came in grace, not to, you think about the power behind the Word and the force that brought everything into being. He came into the world not to burn us up, right? But in grace to forgive our sins. And we just talked about that. That's the Easter story that we just got through. It's an amazing thing. And though he came in truth to give us wisdom and knowledge that we might have life to the full. That he would reveal all of himself to us that we could have life to the full. God gives life freely through Jesus to all who take hold of him, We can obtain wisdom and life through Christ. There's no guessing that's required. There's no guessing. We don't have to wonder what life is all about. We don't have to wonder who God is. We don't have to wonder who it is that's behind everything that we see. God has fleshed himself out in the person of Jesus. And this is where a lot of people, or some people and religions, have a problem. They would say, well, how can you say that Jesus is the only way? We don't. Keep listening, okay? I'm not saying that it's not true, but I'm not the one who makes that claim. I'm not the one who determines that Jesus is the only way. Jesus is the way that God chose to make himself known to us, right? Jesus is the way that God chose to flesh himself out in the world so that we can see him, so that we, as people living in darkness, could see the light, could see the truth of God. And if that is true, then how can any religion or spirituality that begins inside of us as human beings, whether that's through meditation or self-denial or offerings or whatever it might be, how can those things help us see an invisible God that is beyond our world, right? They can't. It can't, right? And so, but God has fully revealed himself to us in Jesus. And in doing so, God gives life freely to all who embrace it through Jesus. And apart from Jesus, we can't know God. We can't fully know God. Jesus, we need to understand that Jesus isn't just another religion. Jesus isn't just another religion. Jesus is God's gift to the world. Whatever your perception, you can start with the broad picture, everyone, almost everyone in the world believes that there's something that's behind creation. That force that's behind creation has chosen to flesh himself out in the person of Jesus. That was the means that he chose to do that. And then finally, listen to what John says later on in his book of good news.
These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
So when he says that these are written, what he's talking about, this is later on in the collection of good news that John wrote, all right? And John is saying that these, meaning all of the headline stories that he's curated and brought together, he says all of those were written so that we might believe that Jesus is, now he uses the word Messiah, which was the Jewish term. The Jewish people were anticipating God to send a savior into the world, to reveal himself to the world, to save them. And John is saying that all the headline stories, all of the things that he records that Jesus did were meant so that we would believe, that we would put our trust in the truth that God revealed through Jesus. And that by believing, we might have life in his name. Not that we would feel guilty, not that we'd feel shameful, not that we would devote ourselves to this unreachable standard so that we can somehow earn God's love. No, that we would realize that God has done this. And because of the things that Jesus did, it should help us to be able to put our trust in him so that we can have the life that God freely gives to all of us, okay? And so remember this, the Bible isn't just a religious text. And that's really important to know. As much as I think that there are forms of Christianity which are a man-made religion as much as anything else, there are forms of that are religious. The truth about what God is doing in the world isn't another religion. It's just what God has done. And the Bible isn't just another religious text. It's not one guy. John is just one piece of that whole book. The Bible is a collection of things that, so many different people have written. 40 different authors, I think it is, wrote different pieces throughout 1,500 years that tell of this story of what God was up to in the world. It was written by a bunch of different people so that if you're exploring the Bible, as we read these headline stories, if you're exploring the Bible for the first time, you're going to want to join us as we look at these headline stories. And as we do that, as we look at these stories that are meant to help us believe in the fact, or believe, meaning put our trust in it and say, you know what, that is the truth. I'm going to give my life to that. As we do that, don't ask yourself, the question isn't, should I become a Christian in the sense of, should I join that religion? The question shouldn't be, should I become more religious in my life? As we read these good news stories that John has written down for us, take a look at the light that is shining in the world, which is Jesus. Just take a look at the light and ask yourself, do I believe that Jesus is the truth? Right? Do I believe that Jesus is the truth? Because I believe, and as I've come to experience in my own life, I think that what most people reject are forms of religion, expressions of Christian faith that may not even be who Jesus really is. But I think that if people were to take the time and read about Jesus, I think there are few people who would read what Jesus did and what Jesus taught that would say that's not the truth. I think that when we discover who Jesus is, that most people would say, yes, that is true. That is that if that is God, and that is what we were created for. Okay. And if you get to that spot where as we're looking through these stories, you say, yeah, that is the truth, then take hold of him. Then take hold of him. If the power behind the universe has fleshed himself out so that you can know him and you can have life to the full. And if by examining what that truth is, which is really what we get an opportunity to do, you acknowledge that that's the truth, then take hold of it. Why wouldn't you if you believe that what he is true? And on the other hand, if you already know about this Jesus, simply knowing something doesn't give you life. And you can grow up knowing the story, you can grow up knowing the theology of who Jesus is, but only by taking hold of it and putting your complete trust in it is how you find life to the full. Because God has given you wisdom. This is stuff that is meant to be applied, not just to be learned in your mind, right? This is a way to shape your life. This is something that you can shape your life with, that God gives you to give you life, all right? And so we're going to go into a time of worship. And I want to just encourage you to, as we're singing this song, even to say a prayer to God and say, God, as we explore this good news that John has recorded, these events of Jesus' life and ministry, if you're real, if you really have shone your light into this world, would you help me to see it and understand it? I just want to encourage you to do that as Christine leads us in this song. And then we're going to come back together and talk for a few more moments before we close off. Let's go over to Christine now as she leads us in this song.
We're going to end with one last song this morning, so I encourage you to sing along. Let's sing this out together. You were the word at the beginning. Let's sing it. You were the word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hand in glory in creation, now revealed in you.
Just think about the news that we've heard this morning. I mean, think about this headline story that John has written about, that the power behind the entire universe has shone into our world. It made himself flesh that we might know him and see him and receive grace from him. I mean, that is incredible to think about. And the song that Christine just sang, it was an expression of people who have seen the light and then embraced the light and realized how beautiful all of the attributes, that all of the glory of the word that was made flesh are, right? And so this is a song of praise when you realize how beautiful the name of Jesus is, meaning how beautiful are all of the things that have been revealed to us in Jesus. And then when it talks about the veil torn in two, this is kind of talking about this whole idea that, before we were in darkness and God in light was up there and our sin kept us from him. But when Christ gave his life on the cross, there was a curtain in the temple, and that symbolic separation between humanity and God. When Christ gave his life on the cross, that curtain in the Jewish temple ripped from top to bottom. And God was saying, you know what? I am now among my people. I've forgiven the sins of the world. So now I can dwell among my people. I have made myself known in earth, right? That is incredible. And so each week, I'm going to give you the opportunity, not that I can grant the opportunity. You have the opportunity at all times, but you understand what I'm saying. I want to provide an opportunity, though, to take hold of God's gift of life. And really all that comes down to is talking to God, again, because God is with us, because we have access to God now. You can just say to God, you can talk to him, say, God, I've been living in darkness. And you can just pray this with me right now, actually. God, I've been living in darkness, but I've seen the gift of life that you've given to me in Jesus. And so I accept your grace through the forgiveness that you provided in Christ. Forgive me for my sins. And I surrender my life to the truth that you revealed to us in Christ, because I trust that it is the truth and I embrace it. And I want you to build my life with it and raise me to life, to give me life to the full as I surrender my life to the truth that you've made available to us, knowing that you give life to all who embrace that which you've given us. Amen. That's really what it comes down to. And so, as we continue through these headlines in the Gospel of John, I really hope that you would grow in your understanding of who Christ is. If it's the first time, I want to encourage you to track with us every week and just ask the question, is this true? Is this the truth? And if it is, then to embrace it. And if you do, if you said that prayer for the first time, if you're embracing a life of faith in the truth that God has revealed to us through Christ, then send me an email. I'd love to be in touch with you and help you get started maybe in reading parts of the Bible that will help you to grow in this more and more. But thank you for joining us, everyone, this morning. Really a pleasure to be able to walk through this with you guys. And I look forward to doing that more as we continue to walk through John. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next Sunday.